Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. So this is the latest in a series of webinars where we're addressing, I guess, the unique challenges that we're facing in 2020. Today's session is going to be focused on our smart lockers and how these can help develop a smarter and safer workplace. So before we go through to the session, I just wanted to point out a few housekeeping bits. So first of all, obviously, when you look at your screens, these are resizable, so please feel free to move them around and adjust them so you get the best viewing experience. Secondly, you'll see on your right hand side a list of the speakers we have today and their bios, so you can investigate a little bit more about who we've got on the call. And thirdly, and most importantly probably, is that underneath that on the bottom left, you will see the Q&As. Now, we're really going to encourage questions throughout this session, but I guess just questions and feedback. So please feel free to ask away and provide your feedback throughout the session. So what are we going to cover today? So, you know, we've seen a huge request within the marketplace around IT challenges. So today we are going to cover those challenges within the IT place, how we can better manage consumables and accessories remotely. So why organisations need to be ready for a more fluid workplace, how to overcome workplace challenges around restocking and distribution of IT assets. We've got Gary from Coventry City Council, who I'll introduce shortly, who's going to give us some insights around how he's utilised smart technology to help with those challenges. And really, as I mentioned before, you know, please feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. So as we all know, we've seen, you know, a huge and very unique challenge this year in 2020. Now, we've seen very much a shift, I guess, in strategy and planning from March when, you know, the situation hit to really now. So I'd say, you know, between March and probably June, July, we were very much seeing, you know, how we can make do, what is our short-term strategy to deal with home working, remote working, and working from home, all of the same thing, obviously. But really, from June, July onwards, we're seeing much more of a shift to how we can make workplaces a safer and better working environment with the challenges that we face today. And that doesn't even see us through to the end of the year, but this is also covering sort of 2021 and moving forward. So we have a fantastic panel here today to cover off all of those challenges and solutions. So we have Carl Prescott, who's from Apex. He'll be covering really the technology part, and they are our partner within the technology space. We have Dominic Kay from Viracom, and with all of this technology, we need to make sure that there is business continuity, because we've seen that this technology becomes more business critical in actually delivering services within a workplace. So that continuity is very, very important. So Dom will cover more on that. And we also have Gary Griffiths, who is the engagement lead at Coventry City Council, who will kindly share his insights around smart locker technology. So moving on to our actual session itself. So really, today we're looking at IT inventory management and why that is very, very important into developing sort of and delivering these services into the workplace. Now, we're going to cover things like the benefits, so, you know, things like cost and user time recovery. We're going to cover how this is remotely managed, the dispensing, the monitoring of stock control, and also the integration element. But essentially, you know, really how we're seeing a huge growth in, I guess, requests for this type of technology and how it's addressing those remote IT delivery challenges. So I'm going to hand over to Carl now, who's going to cover this in more detail.
take myself off mute. Thank you, Trish. So, yes, hello everybody. So I'm Carl Prescott. I work for Apex. As Trish said earlier, we work very closely with Rico, delivering smart locker and smart dispensing self-serve IT management solutions, amongst many other things. So what's on the screen at the moment is an example of one of our tech bar deployments. This is actually at our technology centre at our head office. But we've been putting these in across a number of different corporates for some time now, but with a big uptick since March this year for the reasons Trish discussed earlier. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. There are two different devices on the screen at the moment, a smart locker and a smart vending machine. We'll talk about what their use cases are, how they can help you with managing the challenges you might have now today around serving IT equipment to people in a sort of COVID-safe way, but also the other benefits that come with a smart locker solution for managing IT, which is a significant reduction in downtime when kit might fail, a reduction in the amount of inventory you might need to store, the fact that people can self-serve whenever they want to gain access to consumables or certain IT kit without there having to be an IT department involved, and a number of other things that we'll run through. So the first thing I'm going to do is just talk through some of the styles of hardware and what they're best suited for. So what's on the screen at the moment is what you might recognise as the sort of traditional Amazon locker style locker. It is a steel doored machine with a variety of different door sizes. You can see 3 of the different door sizes on the screen at the moment. We've got the smallest, the next smallest, and then on the right hand side we have a satellite locker with the very large doors. There are a number of doors in between those 2 sizes which enable pretty much any item to be managed. This locker is generally used in click and collect mode. So what we would do is we would load the locker using a delivery code, and then there is a paired collection code that you issue to anybody who wants to collect something from that locker. So typically these lockers are pre-stocked with a number of items. They might be stocked with laptops to be swapped out. They might be stocked with new starter kits, but equally they can be used for drop-offs in using exactly the same workflow of scanning a one-time use code. So this can be fully branded across the front, as per the example you see here, and you get a maximum of 16 doors per unit. There are 2 units shown on the screen at the moment, a controller unit on the left and a satellite unit on the right. We can run up to 3 satellites from one controller, and a maximum of 16 doors per unit. So that's the first style of hardware we're going to look at today. There are also outdoor versions.
Sorry. So just a question on that. So how would you typically configure a solution like that? Because obviously, as we know, we've got various different door sizes. We can obviously have satellites hanging off that controller unit. So how would you typically configure?
So what we would normally do, there's an element of, so the solution is very configurable. The whole point of it is there are a whole variety of door sizes and unit types, and we'll look at some other hardware as well in a second, which might also come into it. But fundamentally what we would want to do is there would be a workshopping session or a scoping session of part of the engagement. And we would want to understand typically what items are managed, what sort of volumes they are, what times of the day you think that they will be predominantly used. There's a question about how many controllers. You can run lots of lockers off of a single controller, but if you've got lockers in very high traffic areas, you might want to increase the number of controllers, so you can split those queues across multiple controllers instead of having everybody queuing for one barcode reader or one keypad. But predominantly we would sit down and we would have a workshopping session, understand the main use cases, what sort of equipment's going through it, and we will then suggest the best kit to fit that use case. It might be some of these lockers, might be some of the Access 6000 and 6100, which we'll come on to next, or it might be some of the vending machines as well. They all have their pros and cons depending on what's being managed and the volume of those sorts of items that are being managed.
Absolutely, so, and I suppose with these as well, because you can have them indoor and outdoor. If there is, I guess, a shortage of space indoors, you will see deployments where they're obviously under a sheltered area outdoors as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got lots of split deployments where there are indoor machines, outdoor machines, and a combination of all of them. We'll mention a bit later on, all of these solutions are cloud-based and connect to a platform called Trajectory. And that platform lets you manage all of your devices, regardless of the hardware type, regardless of globally or locally where they might be. You can manage those all centrally from one platform, but we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. So that's the first style of hardware. The next device we offer is what we call the Access 6000 or the 6100, but this is a clear-fronted plastic door locker. It's made very, very, very tough plastic. They're incredibly secure. The advantage of this locker over the previous one tends to be you can have a much denser number of doors for the footprint of the machine. But also in this style of locker, we can support in-locker network and in-locker power if required. Again, we would need to understand the sorts of devices that were going into it and whether that was needed and which doors needed those kind of setups. But this is just another style of locker that's available. It does allow that the locker you can see at the moment has a mixture of large and small doors. They're the two door sizes available on this style of hardware. If you have all small doors, you can get a maximum of 34 doors in a locker of this size with one controller, so it is much denser. These doors will easily fit a laptop, and the larger doors will easily fit like a laptop bag or a backpack, which you can use for new starter kits or lever drop-offs, and the majority of items will fit into a larger door locker like this one. We can configure these lockers in click and collect mode as per the last locker. But also what we can do with, in fact, all of the styles of locker is we can also run in an asset management mode. So click and collect is great if you want to load a locker full of things and you want to easily give people a way to access what's in the locker by just giving them a barcode or a QR code or a PIN to type in on the machine. Because we don't need to know who that user is in advance. They need to have the code, which is essentially the key to open that door to get the item. But we also offer a complete standalone asset management option as well, where when the locker's loaded, we will have a list of all the assets that are being managed. We will have a list of the users that might need to access those assets, and we will then keep track of the life cycle of that asset from the second it's originally checked in until its death and it's thrown away and sent away and never seen again. So we will keep track of if that item's in a locker, if it's been checked out to somebody, how long it's been checked out to somebody. On the return of that item, we can capture a status. So if it's been damaged whilst it's been checked out, the user can check it in as damaged. We will then lock that asset down, and we might send an alert to an IT department or a supplier if it's being supplier managed. And that's a full standalone service that you can run through the lockers as well. So I think that's the main thing on that locker.
Yeah, so I suppose the other thing as well is that it seems to be probably the most versatile out of the three styles of hardware. So depending on the application that you're actually using, so whether that is IT or even managing other assets, this seems to be the most versatile style.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, this is the one. The big advantage of the previous style of locker is it's fully brandable across the front. You can see on this one that there are clear perspex doors or they're ABS doors. We can actually wrap the doors as well on this style of locker, and we can do fully opaque or semi-opaque wraps on this as well. But mainly these are used where you want visibility of what's in the locker. But yeah, we've got these deployed for lots of different use cases outside of the IT world as well, managing handheld terminals, managing any critical assets, whether they're IT or otherwise. You can also dispense office supplies, so you could manage multiple items in a locker door. And if you wanted to manage printer toner, we have a lot of clients that also manage printer toner and things through things like this. But yeah, the big advantage of this is it's much more customizable in terms of providing power to the locker, providing network connectivity to the locker, and as I mentioned earlier, just the density of doors is higher in this if you go for this style of locker. One thing I didn't mention as well is asset management mode is very good for supporting loan items. So if we've got a number of customers in the fintech world that don't allow any hardware to be brought onto site or any hardware to be taken off of site. So a locker, in this case, a locker like this can be really good for issuing Chromebooks to people, for example, as they check in at the beginning of the day. And then dropping it off as they leave us at the end of the day. So that's the second style of hardware. The other style of hardware we have is the Edge 5000, which is what you might recognise as a traditional vending machine style solution, really, what you might get your crisps or your Mars bars or your cans of Coke from. Other brands of soft drink are available. But these are very much designed in mind to do IT supplies. And whilst it looks similar to a vending machine, there's a lot of technology in this that lends itself much more to doing IT and office supply dispensing. What we've also seen recently is a big uptick in the dispensing of what we're calling corporate hygiene supplies, so masks, gloves, hand sanitizer. We've got a lot of customers that now, in addition to managing IT consumables like mice and dongles and cables and batteries, are now having a couple of rows that are dedicated to masks, gloves and hand sanitizer, because businesses have suddenly found themselves with a need for a way to get those into people's hands, but still to automatically control access and have visibility of what's available in terms of stock. So again, this solution talks back to the same cloud platform as the lockers. So you could sit in Trajectory and you could look at what's in all of my lockers, what's in all of my vending machines, and we can drive a whole series of workflows from events that happen at the dispensing machine. So we can control when stock hits certain levels, we can fire an alert to somebody. Again, it might be an internal department, or we have a number of customers that just send the restock emails direct to the supplier that provides that item. We can control access to the items at a very granular level. We can say Joe Bloggs in accounting is only allowed item number 1 and he's not allowed anything else. And when he's taken an item number 1, he's not allowed it again for 6 months, or right the way down to total free vend. You can have what you want, but in every case, we're going to keep a running audit log and audit trail of every single transaction that happens at the machine in real time. And you're always going to know what you've got in stock and what's been dispensed and to whom and when. So the advantage of this machine is much more suitable for where it's very much a one-way transaction. You're expecting the item to come out of the machine and not go back into it. So consumables and low-cost things that you know people are going to need frequently and aren't intending to return afterwards. So, as I said earlier, like cables, USB sticks, things like that. So, again, sorry, go on, Trish.
Sorry, I was just going to say as well, so just going back to your point, sometimes this kind of device can be quite frustrating for a user, because we've all had that experience when we're trying to vend crisps and not actually getting our item that we're trying to vend. So I think that probably a point to make is that we definitely require samples of every single item that we are vending, so we can do rigorous testing around the test vending as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the process of deploying a vending machine, which is different to the lockers are simple. You can tell a locker, I'm going to put X in it, and if it fits in the door, X can go in the door. The vending machines are very much bespoke builds based on what's going to be vended from it. So yeah, absolutely. We'll request a number of samples in during the build phase of these vending machines. We run a whole series of tests during the test vend phase to make sure that it's a bit of a fine art doing test vending. We need to take into account the weight of an item, the weight distribution of an item. Some things that might vend perfectly okay from the bottom shelf won't vend from any shelves higher up, and vice versa. We need to take into account how delicate the items are. So all of that happens as a part of the build cycle of these machines. There is also technology in these that isn't in your traditional vending machine. This, if it fails to vend and something is stuck against the glass, or it turns and nobody loaded anything in that part of the coil and really nothing dispensed, we know that's happened. There are a series of bits of tech that we roll into what we call smart vend, that this machine will know if nothing has dropped into the base. And if it hasn't, it has a series of things it can do to try and resolve that itself without somebody needing to rattle it or come and unlock it and deal with it. So that's that. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you we've talked about a lot of still pictures of these things. I've got a very quick 10-second video to show you exactly how easy it is to do this is a click and collect transaction, but the other transactions are very similar. Where you're not running click and collect, there is an additional stage of scanning an ID badge or an ID barcode to identify yourselves. In click and collect, all we're doing is scanning a code to open a door. But I'm going to play a very quick video just to show you what the process looks like and exactly how quickly it happens. So. So that was a delivery transaction. The collection transaction looks identical to that, except they're taking the item out, not putting it in. That process, what we see is that process is often replacing a process within a business that is taking at a minimum 5 to 10 minutes of people's time, in terms of somebody having to go and find the people that are responsible for the item they're collecting, hope that person's available when they want to collect the item, then the two people do the handover and off they go. This process makes it totally asynchronous. The drop-off and the collection do not have to happen at the same time. It enables us to support 24/7 collections of items. So if I'm a new starter, I don't have to wait for an IT department to be available to collect all my kit. The IT department can do everything they need to do, load the locker up days before I might start my job. And then as part of my induction email, I might get a QR code or a barcode, and all I need to do is scan it day one, and off we go. So it massively reduces the amount of time taken to get kit into people's hands. We can pre-stock lockers with items, so if there's a break-fix situation and the IT department or a team determines that your laptop's broken, you need a new one, you can essentially have zero downtime, in the sense that I can just go and grab a new laptop, swap the old one in, and that will happen in absolutely no time at all. We have customers that have the buffer stock that they have as part of their contracts, rather than being stored at a supplier for 24-hour swap out, we can have preloaded in a locker for immediate swap out. But really that slide was just to show you it is literally 10 seconds. And in 10 seconds, with only one person involved, it's self-serve, you can have a whatever IT kit you need to get into people's hands really, really quickly. And just important to mention as well, these things are fully vinyl wrapped, very, very easy to very quickly wipe down after use or on a regular basis. We would suggest that people sanitize their hands, as they're doing with everything at the moment, but these things are very, very easily cleaned. So I think that's mainly what I've got to talk about today, unless there was anything else, Trish?
Yeah, actually, Carl, we've just had a question come in. So just back to the vending device. Would users also have the ability to check stock levels of a particular item in a machine? So if you wouldn't mind just covering the stock management element.
Sure. So Trajectory will have a real-time view of everything that's in the machine. On an individual user basis, you absolutely can give users a login to Trajectory to check that sort of thing if you wanted. Obviously, the machines are clear, so you can see when you're stood in front of it exactly what's in it anyway. But internally, the business would certainly have the information as to what was in the machine. If you wanted to give departments logins to Trajectory to see what was in the machine, that information is available in Trajectory in real time. We can also enable all the data that's in Trajectory can be exported in a flat file, or we can organise getting that information into another system, like an ERP system or something. So another route of having that information available to your end users is to pull it into one of your other own systems and let them check there. But yeah, absolutely, we have a real-time, down to the second view of what stock is available. In an ideal setup, your machine will always have items available, because we'll be alerting when we hit a low stock threshold. We'll be alerting again on a critical stock threshold. So you can set your operational processes up in such a way that it is always stocked, notwithstanding supply chain issues, which there have been a few of recently because of certain things that are going on in the world. But yeah, that information is available.
Brilliant. And just another question that's come in as well. So how long does it take to configure a locker from when we're sort of going through that scoping exercise right through installation? So deployment and final installation at site.
So the actual installation on site, or the process to get to the machines ready to the point of being ready on site?
Yeah, and I suppose it is very different, isn't it, depending on the application and the type of locker and the process that we're going to follow. But I suppose if we know kind of about the user journey and the workflow after that point, you know, what is our typical installation time?
Okay. So let's assume we've got to the point that we know which hardware is required. Providing the items are in stock, we can turn around and go from an order signed to an installation up and running and working on site in about 20 to 25 working days would be typical. There are some dependencies on that, particularly if you're going for the vending machine style solution, because we have to do that test vend process. We would need to test the items that are being vended. We can do all of that within, we essentially say once we've got all the information we need, which would include the sample items in a vending machine situation, it can all be done within 20 to 25 days would be the normal lead time we would quote. Yeah, I think that's it. The lockers are fairly simple. They come in predefined configurations. We would need to determine exactly what styles of locker were being used and the combination of doors and things, but then it's a fairly simple. All the hard work happens back in the build process in our office, and then when they're dropped on site, there's very little on-site work to do because they've been configured in the cloud prior to landing.
Super. Excellent. And thank you, Carl. That's a really great overview of the actual technology. And I just encourage that anyone in the audience, please feel free to ask further questions. We will do more Q&A time at the end of the session and throughout the session. So please feel free to submit your questions and feedback. So moving on now. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we are very kindly joined by Gary Griffiths from Coventry City Council. So morning, Gary. Thank you for joining us. I think what would be great, just to sort of start this kind of customer insight piece, would be just to give us an idea of what your previous working environment was around your IT infrastructure and how you were delivering services, I guess even prior to COVID.
Okay, yes, morning everyone. So I work in the ICT and digital department at Coventry City Council, and we were operating out of one of our main city centre buildings. So the ICT team were very accessible, and the way we approached delivering kit to new starters and to a replacement kit was people would book an appointment. They would then come into the office, sit down with an analyst, and we would hand the kit over. But as part of that process, there was an expectation that the analyst would actually sit down with the person and go through the steps of configuring laptops and mobiles. Now, these were guided steps. These were steps that people could really do on their own, but it was finding like a 10-15 minute appointment was generally going to like half an hour or so as we sat down, and the analyst time was taken sitting side by side. So from a user support point of view, from in dealing with incidents and tickets and other things, it wasn't really a good use of the analyst time to be sitting and doing that. We also had a number of drop-ins, being accessible in the city centre, accessible in one of our key buildings. We had a lot of people just turning up and asking for help with little small queries, or how can they do a macro on Word, or those sort of things. We had a lot of footfall into the building as well. So with that kind of in mind, it was always a big part of my drive to actually try and move as much of the kit collection and replacements, so things like mice and keyboards and headsets, into more of a self-serve, more of a opportunity where we were doing less face-to-face, and trying to restrict some of that footfall that was coming through and taking analyst time off the phones, which is also another element, because it kind of delivered like a two-tier user support service. If you were city centre based or even working in the same building, you had the opportunity to do that drop-in and walk onto the floor. But if you were working in one of our satellite suburban buildings, obviously that option wasn't available to you. So it kind of also delivered this kind of two-tier user support approach, where our main entry point for dealing with incidents would be phones, but we also had a lot of people dropping in and around that. So with that in mind, we we had a meeting with Rico. The Rico is one of our key partners for the council, and we have regular catch-ups. And they mentioned the smart lockers was a new thing that was coming through, and so we started looking into actually how that would work and how that could help us trying to move more to self-service and reduce that demand on the desk.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose, I guess, as we know, your challenges kind of changed even further from March onwards by providing those services as well.
Yeah. So the timing of how when coronavirus struck and that our processing at the lockers in was very, very coincidental and very beneficial. So we'd got the lockers in, and and as you can see from the slide there, that was in our Friargate building. So we were about to go live around mid-March. So we had them in place. We'd got all the setup, done all the checks and things that Carl mentioned previously about the vending locker and the test vends. And the Friday or the week before we were about to go live, that's when we were told that the building was shutting down because of the coronavirus. So we had to then move the lockers to our council house. But as part of that process of moving them across and getting it in place, it became it was a key part for us actually continuing to deliver services in a socially distanced way. So all new starters were then collecting their kit from the click and collect locker. We had mice, keyboard, USBs, and headsets in the vending machine, and we had like keyboards and loan laptops in the other type of locker we had there. And so when we moved them in and started pushing and started encouraging people to come in and pick up the lockers, it really did make a massive benefit, a massive difference to us, actually how we can continue to support our end users, even to the point within the first week of us going live post, once coronavirus had locked down buildings, we ordered a second click and collect locker because the demand for people collecting replacement kit and returning kit was even higher than we would have expected. And a big part of that was actually people had no choice. It drove behavior change. It drove people to collect kit in a non-contact way. So in terms of that channel shift, in terms of moving from a face-to-face, side-by-side to self-service, we were, I would say, lucky in inverted commas, but lucky that the situation drove that behavior change much faster than we probably would have experienced if we were doing this in the old normal ways of working. So it's been instrumental in terms of driving people to self-serve and collect their kit themselves and coming in and picking up their own mice and replacement headsets. So yeah, really good from that respect.
Excellent, and I think you've sort of summarised it really well, some of the benefits. But I suppose that's even driven further your IT strategy moving forward. So if you wouldn't mind just summarising some of the other benefits from, I guess, a strategic perspective, how you're managing your staff on site and the remote element as well.
Yes, yeah, of course. So. It's building what Carl alluded to in terms of availability. So there's not a need to come and collect from an individual. The lockers are open from around 7 in the morning to 9 p.m. in the evening for the council house, so people can come and collect when it's suitable for them. We also have one person on site who manages putting the kit into the lockers, like setting up the new starters. So we've reduced our footfall from having around a team of 12 to 20 people in our old Friargate, and we have 2 people. We have one desktop engineer and we have a service desk analyst who kind of now manage that new face-to-face locker offer. And it's reduced the time spent on sitting down side by side, as I mentioned previously, and we have a lot more time now on focusing on dealing with tickets and incidents and other things that add more value to the organisation. But I guess the key thing this has done for us is we kind of have no face-to-face, no drop-in support, and that's the model we'll be working at moving forward for the foreseeable future. So it's reduced that dependency, having people on site in an office just in case someone drops in. It's now gone completely to the other extreme, where it's practically zero touch, other than those people who might have a more specialist or unique need to come and pick specialist equipment up. The bulk of it, as I said, the bulk of the inquiries and the bulk of collections now are done without it even seeing the individuals when they arrive.
Thank you, Gary. So I've actually just had a question crop up. So, and actually it's a really valid point. So could you just sort of describe how the users adopted the new technology? How did they take the new setup? Was that something that was welcomed, or was there an element of change management there?
It was kind of forced upon them from the situation we were in. As soon as our Friargate office closed down, that's where our face-to-face support was an offer, and then the whole of the user support team, as well as actually all of ICT staff, were then working from home primarily. So there was no choice in that approach. So people had to go and collect from the lockers. So there was a process of education and communication and getting people comfortable where they were going. We had a lot of kind of calls still coming through, and our analysts were supporting people and saying, well, we'll send you this code through, and sending a link to videos, because we did a lot of pre-video work of showing how easy the lockers were to use, where they scan, how they can collect their kit and closing the doors. We did a kind of load of pre-work in and around that. But I would have to say we would have had probably much more of a challenge in changing culture and attitudes outside of the coronavirus, because we would have had to have gone on a more of a encouragement and engagement journey than we found where we were actually when we went live with this. So we also, to be fair, we also found a lot of people very comfortable with, particularly with the vending and the click and collect, because those are things that are using day to day. So most people have seen Amazon lockers in stores and stuff and know how they work. And a lot of people get crisps and chocolate bars and other things from vending machines. So it seemed quite a straightforward. And the user adoption hasn't really been that difficult. But as I say, the journey was shortened significantly because of the need to social distance and the closing of buildings.
Yeah, and I suppose we're seeing that with all different types of technologies and working sort of methods, aren't we? I mean, it's the same with home working. A lot of people said, no, I couldn't work from home. I couldn't do my job at home. We've been forced into that situation. So it's probably a similar journey with the lockers.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's helped them being. I mean, we have obviously before they had to book an appointment and they had to turn up on that appointment, and then they had a 20 to 30 minute slot with an analyst to collect the kit and leave. With this, they get the code and they've got 72 hours. We give them 3 days to collect the kit. And that's more driven down the turn. We need to turn over the locker space quite quickly because of the demand and other new starters and kit collection and kit returns, which is the other thing that's benefited. We now do zero-touch returns of people leaving the organisation, so they know that they can come in. We give them a code, they return the kit, and then we know it's been returned, and we can track that asset much cleanly than we did previously in terms of people just dropping things into reception points and that sort of stuff. So there's that added element too. But yeah, it's been driven largely by the state of how we have to work, and we've seen the kind of the benefits off the back of that.
Excellent. So just before we move on to the next section, Gary, is there any final sort of points that you want to make? Just around this generally? Yeah.
These have kind of been game changers for us in our approach to dealing with getting kit out to people, replacement of kit and returning of kit, all those kind of things around the hardware, the stuff that's gone out there. And as I said, the key point for us now is as we begin to reopen buildings and we start to put some staff start to return back into the office, we're not returning back to any kind of face-to-face or a physical desk for people to drop into. It's still going to be the model for the next 12 months or so that we'll be doing zero touch, using the smart technologies we have available for people to collect and return equipment. And we'll be looking to roll out some of the lockers now into some of our other buildings particularly around the suburban areas, particularly the vending machines, so people can get replacement mice and things much easier than having to travel into the city centre. So that's on our roadmap in terms of pushing the technology into other areas.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Gary. Thank you. So just moving on to the services and support element for the smart locker technology. Now, obviously, as Gary highlighted, the smart locker has become an integral part of the actual support network, or this, I guess, the IT delivery piece. And really what you need is business continuity around that. So the smart lockers are supported. When I say supported, I mean installed, commissioned, and ongoing support by Rico engineers. Now, that's just one element of the support that we can offer, the actual physical support from a hardware perspective. But we've also got Dom here today to also just highlight some of the managed services type offering that we can provide around proactive monitoring. So, Dom, good morning. If you wouldn't mind giving us a quick overview, that would be great. Have we still got Dom?
Oh, sorry, everybody. The typical Teams solution where I was on mute there. Thank you for the introduction, Trish. And yeah, I work for Varicom. So our aim for the lockers is to connect, monitor, and manage them. So we can connect them in two different ways. The first of which would be through the customer's LAN, and that would also come with an automatic failover. So should that connection ever be lost, the locker still stays up because it falls onto an automatic 4G network. The other solution is that we can actually have the locker on a primary, so it can stay on the 4G network, which will automatically connect to the strongest network, whether that's O2, Vodafone, EE, so it will be on the strongest network no matter what. This is almost like a plug-in and play solution, so it doesn't actually have to go onto the customer network, as it can be supported for a private network for ourselves. This solution is then monitored through our tool, Ascension. So everything I just spoke about there, as well as the locker itself, all the hardware components. If I just look at this diagram here, I can see that we've actually split the locker into 4 physical components. And what we aim to do with Ascension is to take a live feed from each of those 4 physical components, so that if ever the status changes, whether that's battery, connectivity, whatever it may be, the ticket is automatically raised through Ascension. And we do this by setting different tolerances. So if a frequency goes over a certain level, a ticket's raised, which enables someone from the support team to get on the front foot and be proactive. So we don't want, obviously, the customer calling up and saying, look, we've noted something's gone wrong with the locker. And then actually what happens is you spend about 20 minutes trying to diagnose the fault over the phone, which is a waste of, obviously, the customer's time, and obviously there's no real expertise on site. So we want to proactively deal with that and remotely try and diagnose some of these faults, so that we can then either try and fix the issue remotely and keep the locker up, or obviously we can talk to the customer and say, look, there's an engineer coming to resolve this, maybe do a swap out, and we can actually look at what component is individually down as opposed to the physical locker itself. So the overall aim, I guess, with what we're trying to do here from a support perspective is just to focus on keeping the locker up, keep the business critical solutions running as much as possible, as opposed to trying to answer tickets.
Excellent. Thank you, Dom. So just to close the session, I hope that everyone's enjoyed the content and found the actual content very useful and insightful. Just a reminder that all of the areas here that you can see on the screen, if you do want to get in touch and find out a little bit more, they are on the resource list. So please feel free to view that at your leisure. If we just move on now to further Q&A. So it seems we do have a couple more questions that have just cropped up. So I guess this one here, this one's probably Carl for yourself. So we've got a question here around whether you can use one machine for multiple cases. So I suspect that if you can use a smart locker device for managing office supplies and also doing, say, new starter packs, for example.
Yep. So we generally suggest the best way to set these up is to have a locker per use case, but the whole solutions super configurable. It's the benefit of the logic of the solution, and all the cleverness sits in the cloud. So we could literally break down a use case by door. So we could easily do dispensing out of one door, asset management out of the top 3 doors, and still enable click and collect on the remaining doors. All of that's achievable. So I think the short answer is yes, we can absolutely support it. The longer answer is we'd want to understand exactly what you wanted to manage out of it, and if it's the best way to do it. Sometimes a separate device is the better way to manage some of these other processes, just in terms of the user interaction with the device. You might not, if click and collect is a different workflow to actually doing asset management where you identify yourselves. But yeah, technically absolutely supportable. You can run a number of different use cases, and each user can have a different experience depending on the rules we set up for the user. So some users might be able to access all the doors, some might only have access to an individual door, and the same on the vending machine as well. We can give some users free rein to have whatever they want. We could give some users a budget or a departmental budget, or we can be really restrictive and just say you're allowed one thing and then you're not allowed anything else for a period of time. So yes is the answer.
Excellent, thanks, Carl. And just another question, actually, for yourself as well. So obviously, we've spoken about the click and collect model, and typically that's run as an integrated approach. Can you also run that as standalone as well? So rather than, say if you need resource to actually integrate the technology, can you run that on its own?
Yeah, so asset management and dispensing are designed to run entirely standalone. Click and collect often works better integrated to something. So click and collect, you're going to be issuing codes to people, and it's frequently going to be off the back of a ticket that's probably run through an ITSM platform like Remedy or ServiceNow or something. So the ideal would be to run it integrated with that, which is very easy to do. We've got a series of open APIs that make that really easy. But yes, if you don't want to expend the effort building the full integration, or you want to trial running it before you expend the effort on building the full integration, you can run it standalone. We both have a tool called the Mobile User Interface, or the MUI, which actually Coventry City Council used to manage their click and collect locker, which enables you to essentially, via a very simple app that will run on a phone or a tablet or a laptop, very easily book items into the locker, keep track of what's delivered to the locker, issue delivery codes to people, see what's waiting to be delivered, what's waiting to be collected, and the status of all those orders. So yeah, we can support either a standalone or an integrated approach pretty easily.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carl. So I think actually that's all the questions covered from the session today. Obviously, if you do have any other questions after the session, please feel free to reach out and get in touch. But otherwise, I thank you for your time today and look forward to hopefully hearing from you soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.